I'm Corey Criswell. I'm the Chief Leadership Officer for Adeption in Americas. And I'm joined by my co-host and my partner in crime in the Americas, Matt Murphy. Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Matt Murphy. I'm the general manager in the Americas. I also lead partnerships and just thrilled to be a co-host today.
Fantastic. So today our guest is Laysha Ward. She's author of the recently released book, Lead Like You Mean It, Lessons on Integrity and Purpose from the C-Suite. I, if you haven't had a chance to read this book, it really spoke to me, and it really was life-changing in terms of the lessons and the insights that Laysha shared. Laysha has teamed up with us at Adeption to create interactive digital workouts that help readers dive deeper into the book's lessons. And so, for those of you familiar with Adeption workouts on the platform, we co-created with Laysha two workouts that tie beautifully to her book. And when you go in and experience these workouts, you'll have the opportunity to be coached by Laysha on your insights, which is incredibly special and rare. And this collaboration really reflects our shared vision of creating positive impact through conscious, adaptive, and human-centered leadership. Today's conversation will focus on personal leadership, offering inspiration to apply to yourself, and to coach, mentor, and help develop others. Welcome, Laysha. Give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and say hi to everyone.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's been an incredible journey and pleasure to partner with the Adeption team. I've been learning a lot, hopefully adding value to the Adeption mission as well. And in all transparency, Corey and I used to work together at Target many, many years ago. And so as I was looking to transition and retire from the company after nearly 33 years and was on the journey to write my book, and ensure that it had lessons that would be practical and useful to readers so that they could be the best versions of themselves. I was, looking around for terrific partners. And of course, Corey was one of the first that came to mind. And so I was really pleased and honored that she was willing to lend her voice and her expertise to the work. And each of the chapters has reflection questions that really allows the reader to think about what do those lessons mean and how can they apply them in their own life and leadership learning journey. So she was a great thought partner. And then even better was that she opened up all of Adeption and all of the resources and expertise, including Matt and others, so that I could innovate and test and learn with Adeption and create these workouts. I think the first time that Adeption had done that with an author, certainly the first time I'd been able to do anything like it. And so it was just wonderful to have these supplemental tools for the community reading my book so that they could, go deeper and really try to ensure that it was not only great storytelling, but something that they could actually practically use. So I'm opening up with gratitude for Corey and Matt and the entire Adeption team for helping me do, I think, something that was really wonderful and a gift to the reader in many, many ways. Briefly, as she mentioned, I worked at corporate America for nearly 33 years, actually, and was quite fortunate that the journey that started as a frontline team member in a retail store called Marshall Fields ended up with me becoming an executive in our C-suite, hopefully having a lot of impact. When I joined the company, it was a $9 billion organization. By the time I left, it was over $104 billion with 450,000 employees. And so I was really fortunate to be a part of that growth story where we were able to grow the business, but do it in a way that I think was aligned with my purpose, centered in, making sure that it wasn't just the company's growth that mattered, but it was how we grew, doing it in a way that was aligned with mission and purpose that really allowed us to focus on making sure that we were growing leaders, having an impact in the communities in which we operated, and obviously still returning shareholder value. So wonderful opportunity for me to have personal purpose alignment and professional purpose alignment, all while also being married to my husband, Bill Giffmeyer, rather, who I've been with for over 30 years, and doing lots of extraordinary things outside of work, which is really important to me as well. Before I close out, I would say I didn't just end up in the C-suite. I think a lot of people think senior leaders somehow just sort of land in these positions. I grew up in rural Indiana. We're in a town of only 700 people, cornfield on one side of the house, soybean field on another. The road was a dirt road, in fact, when we moved out there. And so those sort of humble beginnings, I think also frame who I am and why I do what I do. I was the only kid of color, only Black kid in my class from first grade through graduating from high school. So lots of experience being the first one, the only one, or one of a few. That too has shaped and framed how I think about inclusive leadership and bringing others around a shared table. And I think my parents' sacrifice to ensure that we had a quality education that would give us opportunities greater than their own, centered in service, which was very important to them, again, is very much aligned with why I do what I do and why being a purpose-centered leader matters to me. So probably more than you wanted to know about who I am as both a human and a leader, but I do think a little bit more about our lived experiences helps ground us in who we are and how we lead.
I think that was a wonderful intro and leads perfectly into the first question, which is we're going to start with the title of the book, Lead Like You Mean It. So Laysha, could you tell us a little bit about your Lead Like You Mean It philosophy and what it means to you and why it's so important in today's world?
Absolutely. It's funny why it's important in today's world is an interesting point, Matt. I, in fact, thought the world is so chaotic. What a time for my book to be coming out, and wondered if there might be too much noise in the world for this book to come out. And instead, I decided, as I reflected on it, that it was the perfect time. There's no better time to be talking about leading with meaning, with purpose and integrity than right now. I think we all want to be happy and healthy, financially secure, and to do meaningful work. We want to have a life, I think, that is full of purpose and to lead a life that really does have impact, have a legacy of impact. And Lead Like You Mean It offers steps and tools that I do think allow all of us to do just that. And it's not just for executives. It was very important for me that the book not just be for executives. I do think there's something in it for everyone at different ages and stages of their life and career. My approach really asks us to take a holistic approach to our lives and careers. I have found in my 33 plus years of work, so often development was focused on just the professional side of our lives. And I'm asking us to think about where our personal and professional development can come together. We're full humans. We have one life to live, only 24 hours in a day, and finding a way to have some connectivity has been helpful for me. And this approach for Leading Like You Mean It really asks us, and I ask the reader, to make some intentional choices about what they'll say yes to in their lives and what they'll say no to in their lives. And that's really important because it's about prioritization. Where are we spending our time? And at its core, I think leading with meaning is really about operating with intention, with humanity, and with integrity, right? Are we acting ethically, in good faith? And it's about operating from your purpose, right? What's your why? What are you called to do at work and in the world? Matt, I often talk about the personal purpose being a light or a lantern that guides your way. And it's also a measuring stick that really helps you hold yourself accountable for making progress, because I think it's about progress, not perfection. So really being grounded in your purpose is fundamental to leading with meaning. And fundamental, I think, because so often in the organizations that we work with and for, we know their purpose or their mission. I could state targets cold, or the nonprofits that I work with, and the folks where I'm on their boards. But I think it's important for us to know what our personal purpose is and to strive for what I call purpose congruence. Not perfect alignment, but congruence, so that that personal filter becomes a purpose rather becomes a filter through which you can make decisions about what's important for you and where you want to have impact. And where there is misalignment, it is the opportunity for you to think through what that is and how you might create greater alignment. So hopefully that helps give you sort of paint a picture of what leading with meaning is all about, and grounding it initially in your personal purpose is where I really ask the reader and the learner to begin the journey.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Corey, pass to you.
Yeah, thanks, Laysha. When you talked about personal purpose, what really popped into my mind is, we do a lot of work with organizations where leaders are really dealing with a lot of constraints. There's a lot of ambiguity, there's transformation going on, there's innovation, there's the rise of AI and facing these complex challenges.
Yep.
And a lot of times, and I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, but just this connection to purpose, Laysha, one of the things we know is when leaders are doing this adaptive work, when they're dealing with challenges they have never solved before, and there's no guarantee of success, they're not even sure how to do it. What we're finding is that when leaders have a personal purpose, they are able to be energized to do the work that is difficult. So I'd love to hear you like talk a little bit about, as we have these leaders navigating these new constraints, these complex challenges, like what advice would you have in terms of how we can continue to move forward and foster growth for ourselves, our organizations, our communities?
It's a great question. And there is a lot to navigate these days, no question. And at times I know that can feel overwhelming. And I think when you're leading with meaning, you're focused on your personal and your professional growth and applying that to others as well. Like, how are you growing and how are you helping others grow personally and professionally? And so I think it's important to reiterate this idea that even with constraints, even in a challenging environment, even when things may feel like they're being pulled back or there's constant disruption, focusing on your personal and professional development and helping others do the same thing is very important. It is not something you should stop doing. Like, that's not a place where you should cut. It's a place where you should double down. Maintaining a growth mindset is incredibly important to how we live and lead effectively and lead with meaning. So that's a place where I'd love to start. I also think it's important for leaders to think about during these times of challenge to just get comfortable being uncomfortable. That doesn't always feel good. It's not what folks want to hear sometimes, I know, but that's the nature, I think, of leading in disruptive times, is getting comfortable being uncomfortable, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, knowing that on the other side of discomfort is often growth. So just leaning into that, knowing that you will move through it, I think for me has been a way to continue to grow and learn in challenging times and to offer that to others as well. The other is just to take smart risks. In these times, it's important not to be risk adverse, but to think about your risk appetite. Like, what are your negotiables and your non-negotiables? What is an acceptable amount of risk for you personally and professionally? And I think really understanding what your risk appetite is will help you make the right decisions, and to know what the risk appetite is for the organization that you're working with, the team that you're working with, right? So it's multi-layered, is very useful. So the organizations I've worked with, what's their risk appetite? How much risk are they willing to take as an organization on a particular project? What does that mean as a leader who might be working in that organization or on a project, so that I'm making the right type of adjustments and decisions with that context in mind. And what does that mean for me personally as well? So outside of work, I think about what is my risk appetite. I've taken that concept and applied it, outside of the work environment so that I can be making the right types of decisions for my family. My husband, for example, not to tell all of his business, but I'm going to tell a little bit of his business, right? He's very risk adverse, right? And so I, both personally and professionally, while I had to work a lot during in crises and on risk related things in my profession. I have a higher level of risk tolerance. And so I was constantly needing to think about where is the organization, where is the project, and where am I, so that I didn't swing too far one way or the other, like letting, what personally might have felt good to me be a guide. And vice versa in my personal life. Where do my husband and I land when, perhaps he's more risk adverse than I am, and then you negotiate and find your way. So understanding, what your risk appetite's important, but take risks, right? I think so much of how I've been able to grow and learn are through smart risks. Some of them have worked out and have led to, tremendous traditional success. And others, I have been, an abject failure. But that's why I said traditional success, because in those moments, I still felt like I succeeded in a way, because in those moments is probably where I learned the most, and was able to sort of spend some time dissecting that and thinking about what made that still a wonderful learning and growth opportunity that I could apply in different situations. The last thing I'd offer would be to do some scenario planning. In times like this that are so disruptive and where you're adapting constantly, scenario planning has been quite helpful for me. One, because it gives me some agency and power to do some proactive thinking and planning, so that as things continue to evolve and pivot, I've done some early thinking and pre-work around what might happen. And so I like to think about, what could happen, what's most likely to happen, what do I want to happen? And sometimes it's one of those things, or it's none of those things, and the world has gone in a completely different direction. But having done that scenario planning has been helpful for me, because I'm not starting at zero. It's a base and a foundation from which I can refer to and build on, to allow myself to not be paralyzed, but to be able to move. So those are
I
a few
love that.
thoughts.
Yeah, I love that, Laysha. I want to go back to something you said about taking smart risks. In the book
Mhm.
and just in conversations with you, there have been a lot of times where it's been a pivotal moment and you said yes. Yes to the opportunity, yes to being uncomfortable. Can you share a story or two about a time when you've really leaned into those pivotal moments and said yes when it may have been easier to say no?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'm going to think about some that are appropriate to share too, so that I just get myself in hot water, right? I'll think of a couple. One, early in my career, I was working for the department store division of the company. It was called Marshall Fields. And I was based in Chicago, and I was promoted and given an opportunity to take this position, but it required that I moved to Minneapolis from Chicago. And I thought I had landed in my dream city, having, grown up in my town of 700, moving to Chicago, a city of, 7 to 10 million. I found my people. I found a community where I really felt like I was, seen and heard and valued, not just at work, but in the city and the community more broadly. So the idea of leaving that was not on my bingo card, right? I was like not planning for that. And that's where the company's headquarters was. That's where lots of opportunities presented themselves. But I was very nervous, and it felt like a big risk to me to leave the city where I felt like I had really built a community, a reputation, had connections. My boyfriend, fiance, soon to be husband, had moved to be in Chicago as well, and I just wasn't sure it made sense for me. I had never, I mean, I hadn't even been to Minneapolis. I was like, where is this strange foreign place with lots of snow and 50 below zero temperatures? And so I did an assessment, an analysis of what made sense, and I decided to take a leap of faith. Um, and I was afraid, if I'm being candid, right? I'd done an analysis, pros, cons, all the things that one does before you make a decision like that, and decided that as uncomfortable as I was, it was worth doing. And I had that conversation with my boyfriend, soon to be fiance, soon to be husband, because it meant a very big transition for him too. And back then, it was a long time ago. Like I said, we've been together for like 33 years. The trailing spouse, he wasn't even a spouse at the time, right? So getting our head around the comfort or discomfort with us moving, for me, him having to give up his job that he had just moved to Chicago for. We didn't have a job lined up for him yet. So it was a lot. And we decided we'd do it. And so you think about stressors in your life, moving, new job, getting married, all the things. We were doing all the things at once. And so that, again, felt like a big risk, but we decided we would take it and take it together and work hard to ensure that we were successful. And I would say we were partially successful. We struggled. And so it tested us in a lot of ways. And so some of the things we thought were risks were true. And we hadn't done, even in our scenario planning, enough to offset and mitigate some of the risks that came with that transition. My husband adjusted actually faster than I did. I struggled pretty mightily. In fact, I kept my Chicago driver's license because I decided we were going to go back. I wasn't going to stay. It just wasn't going to work. But ultimately it did. As I said, I ended up spending 33 years with the company, and we were able to move through the fear, move through the discomfort, move through the challenges that inevitably did come. But there was joy with the struggle. And there was a lot of learning and growth along with the challenges and loss that at the end of the day made it worth it for us personally and professionally in ways that in those early days were hard for me to imagine, quite frankly. But I'm glad I stuck with it and moved through the fear. I think each time you move through the fear, it becomes something that makes the next time you need to move through the fear easier and builds confidence and a muscle that you can apply. So, leadership isn't the absence of fear. It's how we're able to move through it, use it as fuel. And I was able to do that over time with a lot of help from a lot of people and a few happy hours and a few other things.
Thanks, Laysha.
So I was with a group of leaders this morning, and they're in the pharma and biotech space. And one of the things we were talking about was just the rapid change in today's world. No surprise, AI was a hot topic of conversation. And I give them a lot of credit. They were really vulnerable and asking each other, and sharing with one another what they were doing to thrive in this time of change. And so kind of have like a bit of a two-parter here. So one, what are some of the skills that you think people need to possess or to lean into during this kind of time of rapid change, especially on the tech side? Yeah. And then maybe if you're so willing, if it makes sense, you also mentioned the skill of listening in your book, and you mentioned kind of three different types of listening. So if appropriate, feel free to drop that wisdom on us as well.
Absolutely. What I'd start with is probably not a place you might imagine, but I'm going to start with overall well-being. Because when there is a lot coming at you and you were talking about, some skills that help people kind of prioritize and kind of deal with lots of change going on, including with AI and the like, I just think really focusing on your overall well-being is a smart strategy. Like being met with endless, rapid change can be both exhilarating for some and exhausting. And sometimes it's a combination of those things. And so really, I think sort of fundamental to leading with meaning is a focus on taking care of you and really thinking about your overall well-being, physical, mental, spiritual, community, financial. Like, how are you grounding your self-care plan in a way that positions you to be at your best? And I know that goes up and down on a regular basis. It's not as though it's always smooth sailing, but be really maniacal about a focus on your overall well-being, because I do think that is core to being able to deal with all that's coming at you. So have a plan. Part of your development plan should be a self-care plan, in my opinion. So there's that. The other sort of skills, and maybe some of these came up, Matt, as you were talking to the group. I'd be curious to hear from you some of what they were sharing, because I'm still learning along the way as well. But I do think being curious is really important. Curiosity has been so central to my success and joy in life, I think, and being an adaptive, lifelong learner is really important. You can't sort of feel like learning is one and done. It is continuous. This sort of focus on upskilling, reskilling, new skilling, whatever the lingo is one wants to use, but just learning and being open to learning and learning in new ways and from different sources is critical right now. From different sources. So it kind of takes me to my next point. One was be curious. The other I should say, is be a student and a teacher. And so even as I became the sort of more senior person in the room at the company, I wanted to make sure that I was both learning and teaching, both, right? And sometimes that came from other senior people or my peer group, but it often came from more junior leaders in the organization or outside of the organization who were at different stages of their learning journey and life and career, and who brought a different perspective, a different way of working. And just using AI as an example, or tech, I mean, a lot of digital natives are the more junior employee who perhaps are more comfortable doing certain things that I just hadn't had to do in the same way in my career. And so I had a lot of reverse mentors, rather, I should say, and they would teach me things that, quite frankly, I didn't know. And I was able then to share things where I had more skills and expertise as well. So, put the title and your tenure on the table a bit and just look at everyone has something to bring. And that be a student and teacher approach has been quite helpful, and would encourage people to think about how is it that you're not only learning, but imparting knowledge on an ongoing basis, and that there's some reciprocity in that. And the other skill I think is important is this idea of being a connoisseur of culture. So much of what needs to happen when this kind of rapid change is occurring is just meeting people where they are and having empathy and respect for the types of learners and change management, and how that might be a challenge for people who might be open to learning but are just nervous or afraid or worried what it might mean for their position, or that they might get behind, or nervous to show that they don't know as much as they used to know. And so when you're a connoisseur of culture, I think you are, as I talk about culture in my book, I talk about a culture of care plus, and that for me is looking at the whole person again, right? You care for folks in the work environment, but I also tried to understand and care about what was going on in their lives outside of work. Didn't mean I could fix it all, but it gave me context in which to ensure that we were providing the right level of support and engagement so that people could be their best and do their best. And that I attempted to share that so that they could understand where I was coming from. In addition to Care Plus, it's learning, this culture of learning. How are we really making sure that people know that that is an expectation to be an adaptive learner, to continue to learn and grow and be curious is an expectation, not just in this moment, but on an ongoing basis. And the other for me is trust. I just think trust is so foundational to high performing teams. And when you're setting up an environment of trust, it really does allow people to be in a learning laboratory and lean into building new skills and, being a part of situations where, they aren't black and white. There's a lot of gray, where there may not be playbook that says we've done it like this and now we should do it like that, where you're co-creating something based on the times. And that ability to test, learn, and iterate requires a high level, I think, of trust that is, again, a skill and something that has to be nurtured and rewarded over time. And then you mentioned anything on listening that I might add. I am a huge fan of strong communication, super important from a leadership standpoint. And it's something that I've had to continue to work on throughout my entire life and I'm still working on. And it's both how we're able to share a story, share a point of view, share a message, but also how we're listening. And I do think listening is the sort of underrepresented, underrated component of communication. And so as I've tried to get better at communicating over time, the framework I have used started with message, audience, vehicle, timing, and tone. So, and that's in the book as well, for those of you who have the opportunity to either pick it up or if you're listening to the audiobook, which I did read, by the way, you'll hear me talk a lot about that. And again, it's message, audience, vehicle, timing, and tone, right? All of those things, which I do really quickly too, by the way. This isn't like I've got a big spreadsheet and I can take an hour to map out my message time, message, audience, timing, tone. I can do it now in seconds because it's just at a high level, making sure I'm grounded in what am I trying to say? Who's the audience? What vehicles? Is it in person? Is it an email? Is it better on text? Timing. Should I do it now? Should I wait? Tone, which it was a big challenge for me because particularly when I lived in Chicago, it was like be direct, get it out, deliver it, don't sugarcoat it. And then I moved to Minneapolis and it was like, whoa, the Minnesota nice. They were like, could you just tone it down a little? It was a little more polite and delicate. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, this is business. This isn't personal. We're just trying to get it done. And it didn't work so well. So that framework really did help me still be me, still be authentically me, but to be more thoughtful about elements of communication that I just shared. But the listening component, which I just didn't do as effectively and have to work on really hard every day, I think has been transformational for me. And some of the best advice that I received on listening, believe it or not, came from you, Corey. We were at a leadership development session for the C-suite, our executive team, and Corey was one of our C-suite leadership trainers. And I was one of those people, like, I love learning, but I'm one of those crabby students, like, work, and I do it at the last minute and I'm whining about it the whole way. Then I get there and I'm like paying attention. I'm like taking all the notes and circling things and using them. I've used some of it's referenced in the book. I'm telling you about it now. So I was Corey's best student and probably her worst student, all wrapped into one. But one of the frames around listening that she shared that really struck me was this idea of listening to fix, listening to win, and listening to learn and understand. And I was just like, oh, when she shared that with us, I'm like, that makes so much sense to me, because I think I spent so much of my time in the listening to fix and win space, which was more about like, I already know what I want to do. I don't need any more insights from you. So I'm half listening or not really listening, because I'm really just trying to find a way to interrupt you to get to what I want to say or what I want to do. I already have the solution. And this idea of listening to learn and understand was truly being open to other perspectives, other points of view, really having what I'll call a healthy debate and being focused on whatever problem you're trying to solve, whatever the opportunity is that you're trying to unlock. Just getting the best ideas is the most important thing. And it just created a really big aha moment for me. And this ability to learn, one, to slow down a little and pause. I mean, I operated in an environment with the company that was very like, get stuff done. We moved so fast with a lot of pressure. Like, you don't move from a $9 billion company to a $104 billion company without a lot of pressure. And so just even slowing down enough to value the importance of listening and what that means, I think is one of the things that got me from being a mid-level manager to being a C-suite executive, making sure that other people felt seen and heard and valued, and that I was more clear. Even when I got the insights, I would always say where it was a voice versus a vote, for example, because just because I was listening didn't mean I could take every insight that I was getting and leverage that into the final solution. But I did genuinely want to hear it. The good, the bad, the ugly, the what might sound even sort of far-fetched and crazy, often became the thing that was the main thing, or the thing that really did create a point of differentiation, a point of nuance, a point of really meaningful difference in how we approached and solved a big challenge in the organization and or out in the community where I was also doing a lot of work. So listening matters, and it too is a muscle that many of us, I think, have to try to build and to practice quite regularly to be effective at it. And in this moment where there's so much noise in the world, and it feels like people are more divided than united, I think spending some more time listening and seeking to find space where we can find some common ground, which is not easy to do, is time well spent.
Thanks for that, Laysha. Um, really, I want to dig into that, but we're getting amazing questions in the chat. And so let me ask you a couple. So here's one from Gemma. I'm curious about how to build more clarity on your own purpose as a leader. What are some ways to build that clarity?
Hello, Gemma. Thank you for the question. You know, purpose, more clarity on the purpose, couple things I'd say on how to do that. I'm going to kind of go back to something that I mentioned earlier. I think for me, what has helped before writing that personal purpose statement and getting clear on the personal purpose statement, doing some self work was really helpful for me and something that I encourage people to think about and do. And that self work really does allow you to, ensure that you are grounded in kind of who you are and what's important to you before you just start drafting a personal purpose statement. When I'm mentoring and coaching and advising folks, I will often ask them, do you believe in yourself? And you would think that people would immediately like jump through and say, of course I believe in myself, and be, really enthusiastic about that response. And what I found over the years, and I've mentored, sponsored, coached, advised a lot of people, not just in the company, but in different organizations, because it's a passion of mine and tied to my purpose. They struggled with it, and they long pause and couldn't really respond in the affirmative in a way that I would have expected. And I just think, who better to bet on and believe in than you? Right? You got to bet on and believe in yourself. And I think it's not just about betting on and believing in you, it's knowing who you are deep down. What matters to you? What are your values, your beliefs? It's being able to show up with confidence and share your story. It's not just the story that others want to share about you, because sometimes that's great, and other times it's not the narrative that you would want. It's the story perhaps that they want to share. What is it that you want to share about yourself? And again, it's about that holistic well-being that I mentioned earlier, really being focused on your overall well-being, because before we can be great leaders of others and help take care of others, I just believe we have to be able to take care of ourselves. Self-care is not selfish, it is essential. And so having that self-work first then allowed me to step into the space of writing a personal purpose statement more effectively. And I was thinking, about things like, what impact do I want to make? And for me, that impact was at work and in the world. How is where I'm spending my time and energy aligned with what I want that impact to be? Time is a precious resource. Are you treating it as such? And it also kind of connects to the point I made earlier about the strategic yes and the strategic no. Are you saying yes and no to the right things to ensure that you can have the kind of impact that you would like to have? So in the book, again, there are some stories, some examples that hopefully will inspire you to think about where to begin in writing your own personal purpose statement. And it's not always easy. I'm not going to pretend like it is. But a lot of things that are worth it aren't easy, but are rewarding and super important. I think about it like this. You're the CEO of your life and career. You are. And you get to decide what's right for you. And that should feel empowering. And having that personal purpose statement is one of the first things you, as the CEO of your life, I think, should have. Because again, it becomes a filter through which you can make really smart decisions about what you want to do in your life and career.
I love that, Laysha. And it makes me think of the calendar test. So if we were to open up our calendars, if we were to look at how we're spending our time, does that reflect our purpose? Does that align to our purpose? I want to jump to trust. There's several questions in the chat about
Hmm.
trust. Ian and
Okay.
Olivia both asked about it. Olivia, I'm curious on your thoughts on building trust, particularly in a time of rapid change. I've observed that given the large amount of uncertainty and constant change in workplaces, that can sometimes be a barrier for building trust. So, how do you build trust in this time of rapid change? Ian's also interested in how do you measure it? How do you know whether you have it?
Oh boy, such good questions. And trust matters a lot to me. You break a trust, it's hard to rebuild it. It's not impossible. And we struggled with that a lot but in my work, where we were constantly thinking about and talking about making sure that we had the right kind of trust with our consumers, right? What we called our guest. And you had to earn the love and trust of that guest every single day, right? It just was not something that you could take for granted. And that was, through the guest experience, like what experience, how did our words and actions align? How are we treating them? And so I think a lot of those lessons apply when you're thinking about building trust as a leader with your teams. And, that does come, I think, with accountability. Like making sure your words and actions align is one of the most sort of fundamental ways, I think, to build trust, right? What have I said and what then have I done? And that's also my reputation. If what I continue to say one thing and I'm doing something that is the complete, I'm breaking trust. But if I am doing mostly what I say that I'm able then to do, then I'm building trust. Now, I would also say in that trust journey, there are times when we make mistakes because we are human. And in those moments, and in the moment that we're living in now too, is if you've done something where you have broken that trust, you've made a mistake, in my experience, I have tried really hard to the best of my ability to say I'm sorry. Because and it didn't mean that even all of what happened was completely my mistake, or that I controlled all the factors that led to the break in trust. It's that to me, it's not the point. But when I'm able to acknowledging that the trust has been broken, that you feel disappointed in some way, that perhaps even I may be disappointed in some way. Saying you're sorry is, I think, an opportunity to be human, acknowledge what's happening in the moment, and not to pass blame off on others, even if it wasn't all that you can control, and then offer a path forward that says, what might we do together to rebuild trust? And so for me, it's also making sure that you have partners in both the creation and sustaining of trust, but also in the rebuilding of trust, because it is a team sport and something that I think requires all of us to be engaged in. And that's been helpful for me. The other thing I'd say as a leader, if you feel like someone's broken your trust and you're wounded, or vice versa, you feel like you've let people down, nobody could be harder on me than me. And I would beat myself up. Just, oh, like I wanted to do better. I should have done better. Like what? Or the team that did it that reported to me, or it wasn't even me, it was the company. Sometimes it could be like 10 steps away from me. I had nothing to do with it, but felt so accountable. And so I would just offer this: forgive yourself and keep on moving. right? So to be paralyzed by that is not an effective strategy for a leader either. Learning how to forgive yourself is a wonderful gift. And I would encourage you to practice that as well so that you're able to, again, learn, apply the learning to keep moving forward, which is so critically important. Those are just a few thoughts on kind of building, sustaining trust. This idea of measuring it is a trickier one, right? And there are studies, there are trust databases, trust sort of metrics, ways to sort of roll up the data, qual, quant, all the things, right? And I'm sure Corey and Matt and others probably have some of those that Adeption uses. And so there are some more sort of qual and quant methods to use. But what I would say is even when you're showing people the data, which I'm a geek, I think data matters a lot, but you will also run into people, I don't care how much data you show them, it'll be how they feel, right? So think about the balance and where you can, having things that have measurable data points that you can use as proof points. But then on the human side of it, I have often had to work through that by just being present, being in front of people, trying to figure out how did they feel on the team side or even on the sort of consumer side, as I mentioned before. We would say, the guest would say, oh, I love Target, or I don't. Like, I'm mad. I'm mad at you. I'm like, what do you mean you're mad? You're mad. And they were not mad at me. They were mad at the company. That's because they had a relationship, right? They felt like they had a relationship, something very personal and emotional. They felt something, which is a high level of success to be able to develop a relationship like that that has some type of emotional connection. And so as you're leading people, be thinking about that. Yep, here's what the survey said, here's what the data said, but how do they feel? How are they acting? How might you better understand who they are? What makes them tick? What gives them energy? What depletes their energy? What makes them feel valued? So that you can leverage that in a way that makes them feel fully human and allows you to the extent possible to work through that in a way that I think is, trust at its best. It's hard. It's hard. Trust is hard work, but it's worth it.
I really appreciate that, Laysha. The piece about, forgiving yourself first is, I think, so powerful and something certainly I could do a better job of. So I appreciate you sharing that. There's so many other questions in chat. We're not going to be able to get to them, but we'll capture them and work with Laysha to get you answers to those questions because they're really good ones. I'm going to hand to Matt to take us into our next piece.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So, as we mentioned at the beginning, we've partnered with Laysha to put together a workout, two workouts actually on adeption. And so we want to give you all the opportunity um, to experience that. After all, today has been about empowering leaders, finding your own purpose so that you can then go out and bring that to others. And no surprise, a lot of that will come from being more conscious about your current state, connecting with others, getting inspiration from folks like Laysha, and then putting into action, right? So the be conscious, be curious, be better flow that we follow here at Adeption. So I'm going to share my screen and share a QR code that you can scan, and that way you can log into the platform and get direct access um, to Laysha's workout here. So I'm going to just share. And okay, so you should be able to scan that. Devin might also drop in a link as well. And if you already have access to Adeption, you should be able to click on the sign in button and just use your login credentials. But if you haven't, you drop your email in there, click on the blue button to send yourself a verification code. That'll pop in your email, come back in, and you'll be able to set up your password and be on your way.
I still think it's cool. I've got my own workouts with Adeption.
So what else? I'll leave this on for just another minute, but then even if you don't get to it now, um, I can at least share with you kind of what it looks like, give a little preview.
I would also say if you get a moment, you go on to, I think at the end you guys are going to share my LinkedIn info, which you could just obviously get to on your own. But I just released my latest newsletter, Laysha's Lessons, and I share a bit about some of my findings and learnings from the Adeption community who's been experimenting and taking part in the workout. So I would encourage you to take a peek at that and see what some of the other learners are pulling and sharing.
Yeah, it's super exciting. We've got, I think, over 500 people who've gone in there to
Mhm.
experience it. So um, when you do get in, you'll see the Lead Like You Mean It experience added to your dashboard. It'll be right on the main page. You can tap into that, and you'll see the experience page come up with a couple tiles. And the first one's Lead Like You Mean It. You can click on that, and then the experience will unfold. You'll have some questions that we've worked with Laysha to pose to help you, just like Gemma had put in the chat, kind of like let's get a little bit more aligned with your purpose. What's resonated with you from today's discussion, and where you want to go from there. And then even cooler, and I'll just share this example, is that when you're in there, you may have an opportunity to interact with Laysha herself. So Laysha's been going in and coaching, using the coach function to interact with the readers, the participants, and just share some additional learning and knowledge and connection.
It's been really rewarding to see how open people are. People are looking for community, looking for insights, looking for support and help, and that's been really rewarding. I've learned a lot as well, but certainly have been doing my best to share insights that will be useful for those learners as well. So I hope you all take a moment when you can to go into the site. Because as I mentioned, it's a grand experiment for me to be an author, to have this, set of supplemental tools that provide so much additional value to the learning community. And so I'm really grateful that people are part of this grand experiment and allowing us to test and learn and iterate together. So I hope you'll join us in that way.
Thanks, Laysha. Okay, one final question for you before we wrap this up. If you had a billboard with a saying or a motto, something that you would want to pass on to people, what would your billboard say?
Don't forget, I just came from a brand, a consumer facing brand that was all about marketing. So I'm like, a billboard. I get my own billboard. That would be pretty cool. Okay, so if I get my own billboard, I would like for it to be digital. Speaking of AI tech and digital, so I don't want a static billboard. I would like one that could, I like movement. So I would like it to have movement and motion and maybe music because I'm inspired by music. I would like it to be able to, sort of change up to keep people interested and engaged and coming back to it. See, I've got all kinds of things, right? All the
You
things. You didn't put
do.
any parameters around my billboard. And I would have it say something quick though, because people don't spend a lot of attention on the billboard. It would say, live, lead, and love fully. That's what I would say.
I
Live,
love that,
lead,
Laysha.
love fully.
I love that. We've asked that question a lot of times. No one has ever thought through like the mechanics of the billboard. Yeah, exactly, Devin. Most
Dancing,
creative
gonna be
answer.
dancing, music.
I love it. I love it. All right. Thank you so much. Devin, I think has already dropped in. You can read more about Laysha on layshaward.com. If that link isn't already in, it will be. Fantastic. Thank you. And
Yeah.
she also dropped her LinkedIn profile if you want to connect there. This is our final global chats for 2025. I think we've done, I don't know, 8 maybe. And so please subscribe to Global Chats next year. We have a great group of guests and hosts ready to go. And there we go. Devin magically has dropped the subscription link there. Thank you so much to everyone for being here. Really appreciate it, Laysha. Just
Thank
vulnerability,
you.
candor, and really sharing your lessons.
My pleasure. It was wonderful to be here. Really loved connecting with the community, and we'll try to follow up with some of those questions we weren't able to get to. So thank you so much. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are in the world. Great to see you.
Wonderful.
Take
Wonderful.
care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all.